Need for Speed Undercover gives me existential dread. Not like life is temporary and meaningless, everything I know and love will one day be reduced to cosmic dust, so nothing I do will ever matter existential dread. More like I dread the fact that this game exists. I'll give it a point before we even begin, and trust me, it needs it. Need for Speed Pro Street flopped, not because it was a bad game, it was in fact an outstanding game, but because it wasn't what the fans were expecting after Most Wanted and Carbon. Undercover promised a return to that style of gameplay with street racing, police chases, and an open world, so fans were understandably excited. Of course, starting with those expectations, this game was set up to fail. Now having said that, the game did everything in its power to be a disappointment all by itself. I really don't want to do this, but this is Need for Speed Undercover. The game starts with a sweeping shot over the ocean, with an unseen man saying that this place has changed, and it's time to put a stop to it. 2 police helicopters are revealed to be flying towards the city from out at sea. You know, like a boat. See, this is the game map. This is where the helicopters are. This is the direction that they're moving. This is land, this is water, this is nonsense.
This is America.
This is Sparta!
This is Rocket League!
The helicopters approach an oversea highway, joining a pursuit of a red 370Z. The Nissan swerves through traffic and the player takes control. I've talked about the point where the player takes over in each of my Need for Speed videos, but this one is a little different insofar as the other ones are good and this one is not. That's going to be a theme here. In Most Wanted, you take over in the middle of a race, and the preceding cutscene has you invested in the outcome. In Carbon, you're driving down the side of a mountain, trying to escape a bounty hunter. Pro Street is a little different, just showing off the game's mechanical changes, but even that is better than this. You're literally just navigating rush hour. Honestly, I can see what they were going for here. Races on these congested highways end up being a fairly significant part of the game, so they wanted to show them off. They totally botched it though because A, the highway isn't congested enough to be interesting, and B, you aren't even racing. And you might say, well, it doesn't matter that it isn't a race because you're in a police chase, which is also exciting. And like, yeah, okay, you're almost right. I'll give you your participation points for the day, but no, there is no threat that the police will catch you during this segment, so it isn't exciting. This is the first entry on the long list of things that I hate about this game. A roadblock appears in front of you, and I mean that in the most literal sense. It just appears. You see this? It's called pop-in.
We better go to Wikipedia right away.
Pop-in is a performance issue in 3-dimensional graphics causing objects or textures to pop suddenly into view as they are loaded, rather than smoothly into view. It's awful and I hate it, and it's gonna happen the whole game. So you crash into the roadblock, you come out on the other side unscathed, and you get away safely. Then we get to the game's story, complete with live-action cutscenes. Look, I know that I've made some harsh comments about live-action cutscenes in some of my other videos, but now that I've had some time to reflect, take in the bigger picture, reevaluate, I've realized that my comments weren't nearly harsh enough, and for that, I am sorry. In that spirit, I won't be showing the cutscenes in this game, I'll just be summarizing them. But before I get started, here are a few comments that I frequently see from you guys.
The live-action cutscenes are better than what we get now.
No, they aren't.
I kind of like them.
No, you don't.
You have to do Need for Speed Rivals.
No, I don't. You'll eat whatever I make, and you won't leave the table until you do. As it turns out, I'm making Need for Speed Underground 2 next, so it would behoove you to subscribe. Anyway, this man is angry about stuff or something, but this woman is much too cool to care. She tells you that you're an undercover cop because clunky exposition is apparently the only kind of exposition. She is Inspector Lynn, and she says that she'll be your point person on your next assignment, recovering evidence from a car that was recently stolen from the dock. A specific crew is suspected, and you'll have to earn their trust, so now it's up to you to hit the streets in your brand newish 240SX. The game is set in Miami, so it's a lot like Dexter if, instead of being a great TV show, Dexter was a terrible video game.
I am a father, a son, a serial killer.
Actually, it's set in Tri-City Beach, a fictionalized version of Miami with less pitbull and more yellow. Not good. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard you ask how the game looks, which, again, is not good. Incomprehensibly so, in fact. There's an absurd amount of bloom in this stupid blur frame, and the exposure is cranked too high, and everything gets passed through a piss-colored filter, and that's just the effects. The cars look fine, good even, but the models for most other things are terrible. It is nothing short of a technical miracle that they managed to squeeze Nintendo 64 graphics out of the Xbox 360. It's made even more remarkable by the fact that Pro Street, a game developed by the same company a year prior, managed to look so good. Truly, this game's graphics don't represent just a commitment to mediocrity, they represent an obsessive compulsion with being unimpressive. So now you're free to start your first race. You'll pretty quickly realize that the physics are just not quite right. They're very similar to Most Wanted and Carbon, so you'd think that would mean that they're great, but they aren't, and I don't know how to articulate why. The best I can come up with is to say that Undercover plays like a really good fan-made sequel to Most Wanted, except it wasn't a fan-made sequel and it isn't really good. I'll talk more about the physics later, or maybe I won't, I don't know. Your first couple of races will probably be sprints and circuit races. If you don't know what either of those things are, I don't know how you found this video, but I hope you're enjoying your stay. Sprints and circuits are races where you want to reach the finish line first, pretty standard fare. Less standard fare are a few things that you'll encounter after your first race. The first is the domination mechanic. If you both win a race and do better than a predetermined time threshold, you'll dominate the race, and you'll get this fancy graphic telling you how cool you are, and I think that's it. There's probably an additional reward, but I don't know what it is. Based on the colors here, I think maybe this driver skill thing might be related, but I really have no idea. The next thing to look at here is wheelman rep and driver skill. After each race, you'll earn a certain amount of wheelman rep, which is just experience points. You may be wondering, why does this game have experience points? Did they add a leveling system with no consideration for whether or not the game would benefit from it? The answer to that is of course they did. Your wheelman level does a few things. I suppose the first one to talk about is the progression framework. I talked about this idea in my Need for Speed Carbon video. How is the player meant to understand progression in a game? In Most Wanted, your goal is to challenge the top blacklist racer, so you race your way through the blacklist. That tracks. In Carbon, you want to take over the city, so you race for territory. Makes sense to me. In Undercover, you want to gain the trust of car thieves, so you have to, level up? I mean, I'm not being totally fair because when you think about it the right way, it does make sense. The car thieves need a wheelman, and winning races builds your reputation as a driver, but it feels hella contrived. I think that's because the game is just so opaque about how your wheelman level affects progression, but emphasizes the secondary effects of leveling up. There are a few of those secondary effects. Each level provides a small boost to the performance of one of your parts. You'll accrue earning bonuses and part discounts over time, as well as unlock new parts. You'll also improve your zone bonus, which means something, I think. According to Bad Professional on GameFAQs.com, zone points increase your in-the-zone multiplier, which makes the Speedbreaker more effective as well as increasing its duration. They also add to the wheelman points when you win a race, increasing your wheelman level. I think my biggest complaint about the wheelman system is that it pretends to be more than it is. The Saints Row series had a reputation system that would have made a lot of sense here. At least the first two did. I didn't play the rest because they were fucking stupid. You'd complete activities to increase your rep, and then after each rep level, you could complete a story mission. That was more or less the entirety of the role that Reputation filled in that game. In Undercover, they added a half-assed RPG system, focused on that, and ignored the fact that it's not even an RPG system. In an RPG, you can choose how you allocate your skills when you level up. In Undercover, everyone gets the same benefit at each level. Level 2, for example, means a transmission boost. I like simple games. I like complicated games. I like complicated games that try to appear simple. I do not like simple games that try to appear complicated. Another one of your earliest races will be a new addition to the series, the Highway Battle. It's a head-to-head in which the first driver to pull out to a 300-meter lead wins the race. Free roam has moderate traffic, and most races have limited traffic, if any, but highway battles are basically rush hour. Another piece to keep in mind here is that unlike the rest of the game, during highway battles, a sufficiently forceful collision will total your car, costing you the race. After a few races, you'll get another cutscene. Through an earpiece, Lynn says that you've met Hector and Zach Mayo, local car thieves. Because you're a very special boy, you get to pick a pink slip from one of the race's losers. You have 7 different options, but not really. For whatever reason, it seems as though very little consideration was given to balance, so throughout most of the game, it's very clear which car is your best option. Right now, that's the Lotus Elise. It handles like an RC car, which is cool if you're playing Mario Kart. It's probably the most arcadey car in this already arcadey game, so interpret that as you will. This is about the time that you'll unlock part shops. Performance upgrading evolved over the previous few Need for Speed games to the point that there really wasn't much reason to change it for Undercover. It's more or less the same system from Pro Street minus some of the more simulation style aspects. Aesthetic customization is good, but I mostly avoided it. Like with part upgrading, the aesthetic upgrade system wasn't changed in this game, but unlike with the previous games, I didn't feel any desire to use it. I'm not totally sure why that is, but I suspect it's because the culture of the in-game racing scene doesn't really focus on aesthetic modifications. I suppose that makes sense, given that they mostly want to keep a low profile and not draw attention to their illegal operations, but it robs the game of a core part of the Need for Speed experience of the era. It's also possible that I didn't bother because the game is just so ugly. The next type of event you'll probably encounter is the outrun race. In an outrun, two racers compete for a lead, with the race ending after one driver has maintained the lead for a certain amount of time. Unlike most races, outruns are freeform, so the leader can follow any path they choose. This is the first appearance of outrun races since Need for Speed Underground 2, and honestly, I'm not sure how much they add to the game this time around. Variety is cool, so for that reason alone, they're probably a good inclusion, but they're so easy to cheese that they aren't interesting. As the leader, if you take a sharp turn without giving the follower time to react, they'll continue down that path that they're on for a few seconds, giving you plenty of time to put the lead well out of reach. This can almost always be done within the first few seconds of the race, so these almost feel like busy work. Another type of event that you'll soon come across are escape events. In escape events, you simply need to escape from a police chase. On paper, the pursuits in this game are very similar to the ones in Carbon and Most Wanted, but they feel different, and I don't know why that is. It seems as though pursuits involve more resilient police cars that are fewer in number, but I have no idea if that's actually true. I do know that pursuit breakers are way less common in this game, which is a big L. I know that the police cars are comically large, and I know that heat levels don't work in this game the way that they did in previous games, but I don't know how they do work. It feels like I have no way of knowing what the police will send after me or how vigorously I'll be pursued, but maybe I'm just an idiot. Comically, this game has the most over-the-top aggressive, busted cutscenes in the series. In addition to escape events, there are two other types of events that involve pursuits. In cost to state events, your goal is to inflict a certain amount of property damage and escape the pursuit before the time runs out. Similarly, police knockout events require you to disable a certain number of police vehicles before escaping. These events were both present in Most Wanted, and they fit well enough here. In a mini cutscene, Zach calls you to challenge you to a race. This one is another highway battle, and I think this is where the race type should have been introduced. If highway battles were used a little more strategically, they could have conveyed stakes and underlined important moments. As is, this really just feels like any other race, even more so because you win and then nothing happens. You're just dropped back into the world without any indication that you've progressed the story. Did you progress the story? Was this race even required? I assume so, but I don't see any evidence of that. Another type of race that you'll soon come across is the checkpoint race. If you've seen my other videos, you know this bit. You think it's so funny and it never gets old and you're already laughing and wow, I am so creative. Checkpoint races are the same as speed trap races from Pro Street, and I don't want to explain them, so here's the explanation that I gave in the Pro Street video. Top speedruns are identical to speed trap races from the previous games. While I have no problem with wasting your time, I do not have much interest in wasting my own, so here's how I explained speed trap races in my video about Need for Speed Carbon. Sprints and circuits are familiar to all racing fans, so I won't explain them, but speed traps are unique. Because I am extraordinarily lazy, I'm going to defer to myself from my last video for an explanation. Speed trap races aren't won by the first racer across the line, but by the racer with the highest score at the end of the race. Points are earned by passing through designated speed trap locations at a high speed. Around here is where you'll encounter your first car theft. These involve stealing some high-profile car and escaping the police before returning to the shop, usually with some additional constraints. I think these are awesome for two reasons, both related to the unhealthy obsession that I have with novelty. First, even though they're functionally similar to escape events, the way that they're contextualized makes them feel like a wholly different mode of gameplay. And second, each heist features a unique car that breaks up the long sequences of running races with your main car. These are good. In the first car theft, you steal a Renault Megane Coupe from the showroom floor. This one doesn't actually force a pursuit on you, but that won't be the case later. Here, you just need to monitor your minimap and avoid the police on your way to the shop. If you think this sounds like a simple go from point A to point B, You're right, but it doesn't feel like it. Keep completing events and you'll meet Carmen.
Carmen seems to be hitting on the player character, but I can't say for certain because I've never experienced that kind of thing.
Ooh, self-burn. Those are rare.
She challenges you to a race, so that's what you do. This is an outrun, and like with the highway battle, they shouldn't have introduced the race mode so early in the game. If they saved it for here, it would have seemed a lot more novel later on in the game. Right now, the only purpose of this race is really some weird kind of foreplay between you and Carmen. You'll then have your next car theft, a Chevy Stingray. It's a powerful car with poor handling, so it's almost certainly a different driving experience than your main car. Unlike the first theft, this one automatically initiates a police pursuit. This job also introduces car damage, which helps differentiate the game mode from others. Each collision will take a little health off of the car, and if the health meter is depleted, the job has failed. My only complaint is that they made this theft happen so soon after the first one. Poor pacing is a recurring theme in this game, such as with the next car theft, which is immediately afterwards. In this one, you steal a Mitsubishi Lancer, and in addition to initiating a pursuit and having car damage, this job has to be completed within a certain time limit. At this point, car thefts are a game mode totally separate from the rest, which is good. I ran a few more races before coming across the Gold Coast Sprint, a master event. Master events are a little bit harder and offer slightly better rewards. I had knocked out a couple already at this point, so I wasn't concerned about this one, but I should have been. I could not win this race. I ran it many times. I tried being passive, I tried being aggressive, I tried being passive-aggressive, I upgraded my car, I tried different tuning settings, I tried cheat codes, I bought a new car, I upgraded and tuned that one, I walked my dog, I bought a third car. Nothing helped. Over the course of 3 days, I ran the race 48 fucking times, each one ending in failure. Why was this the only race available? So I took some time off from the game. I started working out. I took up reading as a hobby. I tried fancy wine. And I didn't really like it.
Oh, ew.
A month later, I booted the game back up, I turned off the awful graphical effects, and I just beat it. I beat the race on my first try. In fact, I dominated it. I don't know what the hell that was about, but it really exemplified one of the most annoying aspects of this game, the unpredictable difficulty. This game is super easy, except for the few parts where it is nonsensically difficult. Not like Souls-like difficult, but way harder than the rest of the game. Oftentimes, this meant last second come from behind wins for the AI, which is funny like twice, but the bit wears out fast. Hector challenges you to a race, saying if you win, you get to keep the wheels, which isn't true, but it's close enough. The race is called a versus. It's a normal head-to-head race, with the only caveat being that it includes car damage. It's not too tough, and winning leads you into another cutscene, in which Hector celebrates having found a new wheelman, you. So you get to choose another pink slip. This time, you get to pick one of two cars. Handling is pretty OP in this game, so the Audi was an easy choice for me. Up next is another cutscene. Carmen says that she and Hector are longtime friends, and offhandedly mentions that Zach is obsessed with you. Lynn comes in on the earpiece, letting you know that you have enough evidence to convict the brothers, so it's time to take them out. It turns out this is your job, and you'll start with Zach. The setup for a takeout is similar to highway battles, but now your goal is to ram Zach's car until it's disabled. It takes a few solid hits to do this. Not a crazy challenging game mode, but again, variety is good. Because pacing was not a consideration when making this game, your next event is to do the exact same thing with Hector. I'm gonna go off on a tangent here and circle back to the game's physics. I have no idea how they fucked this up. Most Wanted? Excellent physics, gold standard for arcade racers. Carbon? Just the same thing. They said, yeah, that worked great, let's do it again. Pro Street? Something different, still great. Undercover? Dumpster fire. How? Like I referenced earlier, the Lotus Elise handles like an RC car, and that's true for many of the cars in the game. Not all of them, though, because as bad as that would be, it would at least make sense, and we can't have that. No, some of the cars instead handle like they're driving on ice. How did they get this wrong in both directions? Either way, your car feels absurdly light. I often found myself worried that I was going to roll the car when taking a turn, and a couple of times I did. Even more frustrating is the fact that your opponent's cars are significantly heavier than yours, so even light contact will send you into a spin-out while the other car cruises away. I read an interesting article recently about how arcade versus simulation isn't really a useful way of classifying racing games. Instead, we should classify them on two spectrums: depth of mechanics and racer interaction versus track mastery. What we traditionally call an arcade racer is a game with deep mechanics that focuses on interaction with other racers, whereas a simulation racer is a game with deep mechanics that focuses on technical proficiency. Undercover is obviously an arcade racer, but it's one that punishes you for interaction. Is there a word for when something is bad when you look at it one way, but also bad when you look at it the other way? Undercover also seemed to implement a proto version of the horrible tapped drift mechanic present in the modern Need for Speed games. It's not as obvious as it is in Unbound, for example, but it's still jarring, and unlike newer games in the series, you can't turn it off. The entire reason I'm here is to drift. Why would you make that less fun? If I didn't care about having fun, I wouldn't play Need for Speed, I'd play Forza. With Hector and Zach out of the picture, you get a call from a nameless woman offering you money for work. Like an intern, you enthusiastically get started and, oh, look, I turned the effects back on. I don't know why I did that. Really wish I didn't do that. Your next task is to pick up and drop off a package.
All right! I'm a delivery boy!
You meet GMAC, the leader of the next crew that you're targeting. GMAC is a former cop, fired for being brutal and sadistic, which I know seems like a plot hole, but I think by fired, she meant put on administrative leave, aka a paid vacation, and then given a promotion, which would make a lot more sense. You also meet Nickel, a former boxer who got his nickname because he spent 5 years in prison. That's about 15% as cool as the writer thought it would be. Nickel has temper tantrums, probably from CTE, and based on the way he reacts to everything, I think he's a fine candidate for a future JCS video. Lastly, you meet Rose, the mystery woman from before who runs GMAC's day-to-day. GMAC offers you another pink slip choice. I took the Supra, I'm not really sure why, but I saw a speedrunner do it once and I want to be like him when I grow up. Your next story task will be to take out a couple of Hector's thugs. I guess they're a threat too or something, I have no idea. On a meta level, the timing of this makes zero sense. Zach and Hector are gone, that storyline is wrapped up, and if we cared about it at all before, we certainly don't now. They could have slightly tweaked the story and put these takeouts a little ways before Zach and Hector. That would have made that plotline a lot cleaner. The takeout mode is fine as flavor once or twice, but it suffers from being the exact same thing every time. They had a few levers they could have easily pulled to introduce variety, but they didn't. The first is scaling the target's cars. As is, it seems like the targets scale more or less in step with the player's car, which makes sense logically, but in practice it means that every takeout mission feels the same. Your car is just as good as their car every time. I think it would have made more sense for the first couple of these to involve a slower car and then have the target cars improve at such a rate that the final couple of takeouts involve a car that is slightly more powerful than the player's car. Another level they could have pulled is varying traffic intensity. The earliest takeout missions should have had minimal traffic, and the last few should have had a high level of traffic, just to ramp up the difficulty over time. That would have paired well with a damage meter on your own car. The last idea I want to bring up is time constraints. Maybe if you can't take the target down quickly enough, they escape. Maybe they're trying to reach a specific location, and if they make it there, they're free. Like the rest of these ideas, this could have been tinkered with to adjust the difficulty over time. Your next story event involves Carmen challenging you to a highway battle. When the race begins, you'll notice that none of the highway battle UI elements are present. That's because this isn't a highway battle. Get a ways down the road and you'll be prompted to save Carmen. This turns into another takeout mission, but probably the best one in the game, is really the only one that's different. You have to take out 2 cars before they manage to take out Carmen. It's proof that the developers could have introduced variety to the rest of these, they just chose not to. Now, you guys keep complaining that I don't talk about soundtracks, so here you go. The soundtrack slaps, it just does. It's the best part of the game, which is partially an indictment of the rest of the game, but also partially an endorsement of the soundtrack. There, that's the soundtrack. Your next job is to steal a cop car. There is no novel gameplay introduced here, but stealing a cop car is an interesting enough idea. I do have to give credit where it's due here. This game did mostly make a priority out of shaking things up, and it's better off for it. It's not a good game. No amount of variety would have fixed that, but the game would have been a lot worse if it were just races and cop chases. Most Wanted is a better game, that's beyond question, but it definitely got tedious towards the end, so it's good that steps were taken here to avoid that. Back at the shop, GMAC accuses you of being an undercover cop, which is obviously true, but you would think that stealing a cop car would be enough to convince him otherwise. He wants you to prove that you aren't a cop by stealing, quote, the black and white one. The black and white one refers to a Mercedes-Benz, and stealing it starts like any other theft, but when you get back to the shop, you're ambushed by police who were tipped off about the theft, beginning a pursuit. Again, variety, good. At the shop again, GMAC tells you that he has a very important contract and you're the only one that can handle it. He needs you to steal some specific cars: a Bugatti Veyron, a McLaren F1, a Ford GT, and a Corvette Z06. You're thinking, finally, the ultimate heist. This game is almost over. Maybe that's just me. The Bugatti and McLaren jobs are pretty straightforward. My only real comment is that the best part of racing games is when you first start driving supercars, and that's true here. The GT and Z06 jobs are more of the same, but with the added wrinkle that you also have to evade thugs that are trying to take you out. With all 4 cars stolen, GMAC is pleased. Lynn deduces that GMAC's crew was probably involved in the stolen Port Crescent shipment and wants you to find it. GMAC again offers you a pink slip, and I chose the Lamborghini because I'm a fancy bitch. Rose challenges you to a race, which is mostly unremarkable until about the 90% mark, where you're alerted that your brakes have failed. You crash your car and immediately go into a cutscene. Lynn reveals that your brake lines were cut by Rose's jealous boyfriend, I think. It's not clear. I mean, she says it was the boyfriend, but then it's also kind of implied that you're taking the fall for something. Unrelated, you now have to stop crime lord Chow Wu. What was the point of the crash? You still have your car, and I don't see how it advanced the story. I'm sure I'm missing something here. GMAC is pissed that Chow Wu is doing business in Tri-City, so you're gonna steal one of his cars and use it while committing felony property destruction to frame him. This is a standard cost to state event, but it's in a Pagani Zonda, so it's tight. Chow Wu calls to say,
"You stole my car and yet you're still alive. Most unusual."
He offers to let you live if you recover a car that was stolen from him by GMAC. You say, yeah, sure, whatever, and then face the tedium of 3 consecutive takeout missions: Nickel, Rose, and GMAC. Carmen thinks that Zach and Hector disappeared because they stole this car. It's Chow Wu's car, but she doesn't know that. You don't fill her in on anything, which is tantamount to lying. You can't blow your cover by telling the truth, which is understandable, but I think the fact that you've done nothing but lie to her for the entire game becomes relevant later. Chow Wu calls to say that he's kidnapped Lin and that you need to bring him his car, which you of course do. When you arrive, Chow Wu unties Lin, revealing to the player character that the two have been cooperating the entire time. Lin pulls out a piece and domes Chow Wu and his henchmen. She takes off in the BMW and you have to take her out. No timer, no car damage, 0 urgency. Police are pursuing you, but that's such a minor factor. A fittingly impotent finale for an impotent game. Lin gets arrested, and then we finally learn what was inside the suitcase in Pulp Fiction. It wasn't gold, it wasn't diamonds, it was a PDA with pictures of Uma Thurman's feet. I'm losing this metaphor. The point is, Chow Wu wanted this car so badly because it had this already antiquated piece of technology inside, like in a cup holder or something. I guess Chow Wu has been like keeping a diary of his crimes on this PDA, so now he needs it to avoid being prosecuted by someone for something. I don't know. I don't really care to know. I want to call the story convoluted, but it isn't. It's just unnecessary. That's the only word I really have for it. Not the entire plot, but almost every individual aspect of the plot was just unnecessary. Anyway, in the final cutscene, Carmen is hitting on you pretty aggressively.
Hey, Patsy.
She asks you to take her back to the university where she is a med student. Turns out being a mechanic is her hobby. I'm all for enriching characters by giving them more backstory, but that's not what's going on here. This is you standing on a game show stage, and then the host says, show them what they won, and then a big door swings open, and then look at that, you get to fuck a doctor. That's how Carmen is used here, as a prize. Again, recall that you've done nothing but lie to her since you met her, so there's that too. There are also shades of classism here, like, yeah, this woman is a great prize when she's a mechanic, but wouldn't she be even better as a doctor? Obviously, I recognize that the income disparity makes dating a doctor a more attractive prospect, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but to so shamelessly put it front and center suggests a strong opinion on what doctors and mechanics are worth. It's like no one saw the need to even bother using tempered language because doctors are so obviously better than mechanics. They didn't even stop to question it. Whenever I talk about shit like this, some smooth-brained motherfucker always pops up saying something like, it's just a game, you're reading too far into it. And no, I'm not. I'm sure the intention wasn't to say that doctors are better than mechanics, but someone who feels that way did let their shitty values bleed into the game. Carmen didn't have to be a doctor. In the final cutscene, she could have just asked you on a date, and congrats, that's your prize. Instead, it was decided that Carmen the mechanic isn't good enough, but Carmen the doctor is. And Carmen's value as a person isn't even considered, but I'll let you ponder that on your own. Soapbox over. This game sucks, but I also think it could have easily been really good. All they had to do was fix the graphics, the physics, the story. I guess that's pretty much everything, isn't it? Maybe it couldn't have been good. Of the 4 Need for Speed games I've covered on my channel so far, this one is easily the worst. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I will not be playing this game again. Now, I think you're an idiot, but if you want to prove that, you can come shitpost on the Discord server. I have no idea how to run a server, so if you've ever wanted to witness a train wreck in real time, this is your chance. I'll link that in the description. Lastly, I set up a Patreon. If it's April of 2023 when you watch this video, then I do not have any Patreon rewards to offer, so only consider supporting if you really, really want to help me reach my goal of someday going full-time, or if you really, really hate having money and need an easy way to get rid of it. You'll get nothing in return. If it's not April of 2023, maybe I have rewards set up now, I don't know. I have some things in mind for what I want to do in that regard in the future, so if you might be interested, go check it out. That link, as you guessed, is also in the description. Anyway, thanks for watching.